do you believe, general public, because I wasn't aware of it, that the covenant actually exists?
I've absolutely no doubt that they don't know it exists. I think it's one of these things. It became a bit of a buzzword in the last Parliament that was used as a stick to hit the government with, and I'm not saying we didn't deserve to be hit, but it came out of debates about, are we providing people in Afghanistan with the right kit? Are we looking after people properly when they're serving in places with extreme temperature, etc.? And I think the fact the covenant was effectively, it became a political tool that was used to beat the government with, led to it thankfully actually becoming more spoken about and more debated, and hopefully more given the resources it needs. And also then you end up with development of things like council champions to promote the covenant. But I think in terms of the public, I don't think the public's got a clue that it's out there.
Right, well, I set about turn-ups in 2009 specifically for the ex-forces community, ending up in the criminal justice system. The key thing is, wherever I worked in my social work career, it didn't matter what I did, there was always an ex-serviceman. They weren't getting the services they required. So if you were working in social services and there was child protection issues, then there may or may not be an ex-serviceman who was in there with regards to issues around domestic violence or drugs and alcohol. If it was the criminal justice system, I kept bumping into them almost on a daily basis. If it was in the homeless sector, ditto. If it was in mental health services. And to keep a veteran in prison costs over £126,000 a year. And we operate on nowhere near that cost to actually keep people in the community. And we've got a lot of guys who are on probation, as I said, and these guys spend an incredible amount of time with us. If you look at the time that people spend with a probation officer, if you're lucky, it'll add up to about 12 hours over a year. We added up the time that some guys spent with us on an order, and it was something like 967 hours. Again, the other big savings are, if you've got somebody who's not committing crime, they're not misusing drugs, they're not involved with mental health services as much as they used to be, they're not going to accident emergency, they're not getting call-outs from the police, again, the saving to the public purse is absolutely phenomenal. And it adds up to millions. With the amount of money we're spending on veterans, keeping them locked up, we could actually, if it was spent wisely, be building new schools, hospitals, etc., and keeping an awful lot of essential services and jobs.
We ask people to do very, very abnormal things. We ask people to go out of this country and be prepared to die for us, but even more shocking, to be prepared to kill for us. And then they come back into this country and we expect them just to pick up where they left 10, 20, 30 years previously, as if they've just been in a 9-to-5 job.
And what I realised was there was a lot of guys coming back and trying to resettle into the community, and if they'd had experience of combat, then it was more and more difficult for them to make that assimilation back into the communities that they once want to live, and this resulted in sort of all sorts of problems with relationship breakdown.
However, at that exact moment in time as well, I was having problems with my wife at the time, and that kind of maybe influenced us to split up as well. So she kind of went her way towards the UK, and I packed my bags up, and I was just on a sort of sad, angry mission, and I thought, well, I'm just going to go back to Mallorca and just do what I was doing. Maybe this wasn't meant to be.
I had a bad relationship. It went a bit tits up. A girl called Rebecca. I met her about after I first moved back to the northeast. After about 3 months, I had a job, and then I met her. I had a relationship, had 2 kids. Then the relationship went wrong. We split up on that, and then I got into trouble basically.
At the same time, they would always destroy that relationship, and half the time they didn't know why. In the 80s, people started to identify and say that people were suffering from post-traumatic stress, and I think that was probably one of the biggest steps forwards. Really, the Americans had sort of tapped into this and discovered that there was people who were suffering from post-traumatic stress as a result of the combat experience, whereas in England we were a bit slow off the mark, or in the UK we were slow off the mark.
Now, what is combat stress? Well, the name in some ways gives it away. It's the experience of combat resulting in psychological disturbance, upset. But more technically, I guess, we would call it post-traumatic stress disorder. So there isn't a diagnosis of combat stress as such, but there is something called PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder has been around for a long time. We know that because of shell shock from the First World War, battle fatigue from the Second World War, and now combat stress from the more recent conflicts. What is this? Post-traumatic stress is, some people describe it as a reaction to a very unusual experience. Usually those experiences are life-threatening or horrific in some way. For example, seeing death and destruction, as you will do in a military setting, in a way that ordinary people may not be geared up to see those things.
And you've got to understand this person's doing a job that not many other people his age do. You're talking about death on a daily basis, killing people, saving people. You're put into the extremes of life day in, day out. Over years, it has such an effect mentally and physically on your body. And the only thing you get to do is sign off, do a month's course, like say driving license or something, pub management, and then that's it. You're released back into society. It's a really dangerous thing to do to that person.
The other key thing is, as well, is there's an awful lot of the Yanks learned from the Vietnam experience that if you don't actually engage this group now, you've got a lot of disaffected, disenfranchised veterans coming back who are just never going to fit into mainstream society.
There is evidence for PTSD having a multitude of presentations. So PTSD can arrive pretty soon after an event. Sometimes PTSD can disappear for a while and then come back later. So we've met people who've really got on with their lives and had no problems as such, and then something else has happened in their life that has brought back other traumatic memories. It might have been a road traffic accident, it might have been an assault, it might have been feeling particularly helpless in the city centre one night, after a scuffle. And what seems to happen is that this lives at the same address as previous trauma, and sometimes this brings it all out. So we meet people who come in very puzzled, very confused, because memories of Northern Ireland or the Gulf or wherever it was have suddenly appeared almost out of nowhere. Now, when you ask them a little more detailed questions, sometimes what they've been good at is avoiding situations that trigger those memories, or there's been subtle ways that memory has influenced the way they've lived their life. So we've got to ask questions to try and carefully tease out whether the trauma was really submerged, or whether, like a boulder under a stream, even if it's submerged, it will have an influence on the flow of things above it. And so traumas are a bit like that.
However, they're also talking about traumatic brain injury. So I'll give you an example. A lot of the guys I've got at the minute who've got prescribed medication for depression or personality disorder or bipolar, strange enough, all of them, when they've served, were in close proximity to an explosion, be that in Bosnia, be that in Northern Ireland or anywhere else they've served. And the Americans are looking at not only post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress disorder, but also TBI, which they're calling traumatic brain injury. And mild traumatic brain injury is where somebody's near an explosion and it causes a mild form of concussion. And I was talking to someone in America last week, and they were saying that they're starting to do scans of some of the veterans' brains, 25, 26-year-olds, but they're actually brain scans are coming back showing that there's damage in those brains that would be equivalent to a 60-year-old boxer. So you've got these guys where there's a fundamental change in how their brains are working and operating, and also it's coupled up with post-traumatic stress disorder.
I was locked up for 38 days. I was put in an 8 for the head of my arm, and I rolled the carpets up in the living room into a sausage and balanced everything 6 inches apart, all the ornaments, and just sat in a corner. I'd been awake 7 days. But I was still going to work though, still paying the mortgage, but I was living in this weird world. So they sectioned me for 38 days in Littlemore Hospital.
We've got guys serving in the British Army, the American Army, Canadian Army, probably Australian as well, and a few other European countries that have got more combat operational time under the belt than any other veteran from any other battle. And they've done multiple tours, and just looking at the statistics with regards to post-traumatic stress from America, it is a time bomb waiting to go off with regards to the numbers of people who will experience difficulties with regards to mental health.
A mixture of two persons. I went from being this really strong, positive, healthy, fit guy, and then I ended up turning into the person that I never ever wanted to end up. I became addicted to drugs. I was suffering from mental illness. My body broke down on us. I was on a self-destruct mode. I didn't, and when all this was going on, I didn't know what was happening to us. So people's perception of me must have changed unbelievably. People started avoiding us, which after everything I had did for my country and the person I became was the worst thing that could have happened to us.
Post-traumatic stress is defined by flashbacks and nightmares, but before we talk about those, I'd like to talk about probably what people describe first, which is a sense of isolation. They often feel disconnected from themselves, hardly recognising who they've become, but also disconnected from their families and friends. And they live quietly, silently with this wound. So when I meet people for the first time, often that's the thing that they talk about first, being separate, somehow feeling different from the person they used to be, the jovial, fun-loving partner or dad or colleague or comrade, a shell of their former self.
When I was in Los Angeles, I met two Vietnam veterans, no, three, one in New York and two in Los Angeles, who were homeless. And these guys were in the 60s, 70s, and they just never ever got their act together. And I don't think we should ever see that. We need to get our act together and work collectively in the best interest of our forces people.
There's EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and processing. Big, long, I've got a very unfortunate title, and there's trauma-focused CBT, and these two are evidence-based therapies for post-traumatic stress. Now, if you so post-traumatic stress, you can have people who've had an RTA. We could have an RTA and develop PTSD, and not knowing you, but thinking, that you've probably got fairly stable lives outside of that, blah, blah, blah. Probably treating that would be fairly straightforward. But if you have someone who's had multiple tours of Afghan or Northern Ireland and have learned to drink a lot, and maybe have come out, now developed a forensic history, they've been in the prison system, their needs are much more complex, and so the treatment needs to be much more sort of thoughtful about where tries to help. And so, is it going to cure it? Well, there's a great deal that needs to change.
Yeah.
Some people can get a radical shift, but I guess with more complex PTSD, it's about turning down the symptoms enough so people can get on with their lives.
So there was issues around post-traumatic stress disorder and the inability to access services that could help you. There's issues around people not making the transition back to the civilian community particularly well and being particularly well supported. There's issues around identity. So when I came out, I thought I was the bee's knees, but I wasn't, and had to recreate an identity that would work in the civilian community, and that wasn't as easy as people think. And there's issues around adjustment. So mine was a shoulder injury, which is still problematic today. So I had to then tailor make what I could do for the rest of my life that didn't involve me swinging from a tree or something.
I don't know, I'd done all this so young. I was too young and naive, you know what I mean? Straight out the army, straight in the thing, and I knew everything. Well, I did, but I didn't.
So there's a real thing about if you come out and you've got what I call invisible wounds, then you don't want to ask for help because it doesn't look like there's anything wrong with you, but there could be all sorts of traumatic things going on in your life and that you can't make sense of, be that mental health, be that completely overcompensating and self-medicating with drugs and alcohol, which virtually everybody who uses my groups has suffered from in the past, relationship breakdown, and sense of isolation and loneliness and a sense of being lost. You don't know where you are, you don't know where you fit in, you don't know what you want to do, you don't know where you want to go, you don't know what's available to you, you don't know what options you've got, you don't know who's your friend. One of the brilliant things about serving in the military is it absolutely destroys your sense of trust, not in the people you serve with, but when you come back. When you serve with people, you trust them implicitly. You've got a closer relationship with some of the people you serve with than you do with families, your own family, and I don't think people understand that. And when that's gone, it is like a huge bereavement. So you'll come back, you're given the confidence to get on with your life, but you're actually very, very unskilled at coping or navigating.
My only real experience of this in the past was my cousin came out of the force in '79, and I was massively impressed about how well he was treated in terms of the council finding him a home, and certainly the army and the council working together, and they got him a job that he stayed in the job till the day he retired, which is some 25 years later. My experience now, and it's quite anecdotal and what I'm being told by people, is it's a very, very different scenario, but part of the problem you've got is, I think that the will is there, for example, with the council. The problem you've got is we have a huge shortage of housing. The biggest issue I have in my in-tray every day of the week is housing. There quite simply is not enough stock to go around. We've also got the situation that's developed over the last 20, 30 years where a lot of families are breaking up now, and so you've got single people who need houses, which in the past there would have been couples living together. So there's a huge issue about supply and demand, and I'm not sure that the councils are capable of giving the veterans the things, or the retiring personnel, the things that they should be expected to do. And it's not because they don't want to, I think it's just the genuine issue about supply and demand.
And we've got guys who joined at 16 and have come out at 30, and they've got no experience at all of what you have to do. So, you know, the idea of paying your rates or your water bills, or, you know what I mean, how to set direct debits up, is usually somebody, either the army or your wife's done for you, and that leaves you very de-skilled with what you need to do to survive in the civilian community.
I would have still been homeless, you know what I mean? This has all taken off since I've gotten that chance meeting.
So you were homeless as well?
Yeah.
How long?
4 years. 4 years from my house was set on fire, and the council, instead of rehousing us, accused us of setting my house afire. I had 2 trials at Crown Court, proved me innocence. Obviously never did it. Got all not guilties, and then the council was forced to rehome us, and I was like, you bastards, and I never got an apology or nothing, and then I put in for a loan for them to help us put some furniture and that in. They wouldn't give us nothing, right? So I've sat in there for 3 years at the time, sitting there with my mental illness kicking in, everything, having nothing, and trying to write letters to these people saying, look, I suffer from this illness, I'm entitled to this, can I have this? And I'd get letters back saying, no, I don't think you need it.
So what I did in response to that, we set up peer-led support groups, and the peer-led support groups, everybody in them's a veteran. Everyone has had experience of something, so we've got guys from the criminal justice system, we've got guys who've been through the mental health services, we've got guys who've got have got drug and alcohol problems, who actually stay sober for my groups, which is a great thing. And you've got these people all come together and we all talk about the issues, but it's not about tea and sympathy. It's not for the mad, the miserable and the maudlin. This is what we do, is we tap into the ex-soldier and we tap into that flame within, and we light that back up again, and we give them a sense of purpose and a sense of well-being, and somewhere where they can go and talk openly that is psychologically and physically safe to be in.
If I could change anything, I probably would have sorted myself out long before I actually got out of the army. There should have been help there then, or help just as I was coming out, you know, because I knew I had problems thinking about the past. But like I said, I was able to put it out of my mind. I wasn't thinking of the future, you know. Now that I realised that in the future I was going to play so much on my mind as what it has, I would have tried to get help, more help than I have, because there's not a lot of help out here. And if it wasn't for people like Tony who's organised this About Turn place, you know, I would just be sitting in the house feeling sorry for myself and my mind playing tricks on us, because I often feel as if I'm back in Eden, and I can smell the place, I can taste the place, and it was a horrible, dirty, stinking place, you know, and I don't want to have them memories.
And we've spent a lot of time identifying ex-service personnel in like mental health services or in the probation service, or we've got a solicitor who helps out with lots of issues, whether that's on a pro bono basis, whether it's housing law, prison law, mental health law, family law, and there's another one. But we can get you instant access to that, and the guy who does that's an ex-Marine. And again, he understands the ex-forces community, and he's prepared to represent them in court if it have to get to that point, and then he'll say what package of support we'll do it. So it's this about social integration, this collaboration in the community to help people get the right support at the right time and given by the right people.
About Turn was mentioned to me through my probation worker, who I really admire. She's done everything for me over the last few years, and she was the person that put me onto About Turn maybe 2.5 years ago. And since then I've worked alongside About Turn, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
I've got a gym that Tony showed me as well. It is a normal sized gym, so I can do the lessons in there. There's a punch bag up there, so we have got the facilities there to do the lessons. There's also a few disabled people that we're going to be teaching. They're in wheelchairs. The thing with martial arts is it doesn't matter how you start, if you're standing or if you're sitting, these people in wheelchairs can still learn things about pressure points. If somebody tries to come from behind or anything like that, they could learn how to remove an attacker, or at least put the attacker into shock for enough time to be able to get away or anything like that. So I'm going to be working with them, showing them a few things, and then hopefully get a few lads in here and get them right into the martial arts. They could maybe even teach them to teach it in future, or anything like that, open a few doors for them, so yeah.
Like, we've got guys who'll be able to advise one guy that if you went to a mental health professional and if he said go and do A, B and C, he would never do it. And so there's a bit about who delivers that message, how you deliver that message and how you support people. So we take it a little bit further than that, so the people who volunteer for About Turn, we help them work with other individuals who are ex-veterans, and they refer and chaperone people to appointments.
And the local guy who comes round here put us in touch with About Turn, which is an organisation based in Newcastle, who I've been in contact with ever since, and they've been very helpful. keeping us busy doing different things.
To make sure that there's full engagement, they don't miss those appointments. They'll sit with them in those meetings, they'll travel with them there, and they'll travel back with them. And that in itself means we're accessing services. So our job is to get these individuals, make them feel comfortable, make them feel well, and then plug them into the mainstream services. Try and pick up on the skills that they had as in the military, of being able to lead, taking responsibility and look after your oppo really, and engage them in something where they can be doing the same. If we got enough funding, I could employ at least a team of 10 who could be dealing with the level of caseload we're getting. We've had 170 referrals through since we started in 2009, and of those 50% are from the criminal justice system, 30% are mental health services, and 20% are from self-referrals.
The regiment I served with was 12 Air Defence Regiment, the Royal Artillery. It involves using surface-to-air missiles, that sort of thing. I can't even think about anything else. Well, I didn't leave on my own accord. I left because I was medically discharged at the age of 22 years old, suffering from bipolar disorder.
Well, that's what I mean. That's how it's taken 10 years now, because I haven't had the chance meetings. It was only through meeting Tony that I ended up seeing Kevin. You know what I mean? And but for years I was like drifting through, and I was ending up in drug places. But the psychiatrist who diagnosed this just said I had morbid jealousy, right? And I was like, fuck me, where's that come from? Paranoia. I was delusional. And I was manic, and I was none of them. You know what I mean? I was severely depressed, and I had post-traumatic stress.
We also do extracurricular activities outside of those groups, so we might do equine therapy. We go to a wonderful place up in Scotland where the guys are learning a horse ride. Been up 4 times so far, and they give a little bit back by helping out and doing some of the building work or any of the cleaning up around the place that needs doing, because their main reason is to work with disabled veterans. So my guys get a sense of purpose and a sense of dignity back by going up there and helping others. We've done angling. We found that fly fishing and coarse fishing are a wonderful therapeutic tool. So once a week over the next year, we'll be taking people out angling, where they'll try different forms of angling, but they'll also work towards a qualification, which is Open College Network accredited. That'll give them something that they can put into a portfolio of achievement. We already run a group which is alcohol awareness, and that's Open College Network accredited, and those individuals do that course, and it's now a level 3 course, and then once they've done that, they can come back and actually use those skills that they've learned, which either might be for themselves or to use with other people, to actually improve the way they interact with other veterans. We've got a digital photography course coming soon, which is going to be based all around identity. We've got an art project coming up where we're going to do some artwork and hopefully have an exhibition. And we're doing something around food and nutrition, because we've identified a lot of the veterans we work with eat pot noodle sandwiches and other highly nutritious rubbish, and probably mixed with Frosty Jack cider, which has never seen an apple unless it was sat next to them in the store that was selling them. And so what we're trying to do is teach them how to cook, teach them how to prepare food, what's nutritious food and what's good for them, and we've linked up with an organisation that are going to help us to do that. We've got an allotment where we grow our own food, so you can see where this is going. We're going to start growing our own food, then we're going to start preparing those vegetables to eat them. And then we're also from the fishing, so we're going to be in a lot of fish and chips, I imagine, over the next few years. But the idea is to teach people what to do and how to cope, because a lot of the guys need to learn independent living skills in which to actually survive in an alien community. It's not all done for you.
I would make it a much bigger impact on your life, and you need at least 6 months to a year to adjust, to find where you're going to resettle, how you're going to resettle, what's the best things for you in civilian life. You should be financially backed by this. There should be just as much effort put into your resettlement as there was turning me into a soldier in the first place.